What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and I'm going to make you guys an expert on the character of Echo in Marvel Comics. Now, here's the funny thing about this. I have no idea how this video is going to be received. I have no idea if people are going to care or not care, because the response to Hawkeye has just kind of been like, I mean, it's cool. So people might kind of be like, I mean, I don't really care. Or they might be like, yes, I want to know about Echo. So Maya Lopez first appeared in Daredevil Volume 2, issue number 9 in 1999, and she was created by David Mack and Joe Quesada. Now, one of the big misconceptions about the character of Maya is that her creation was designed to be based on the character of Taskmaster, and that's not entirely true. So there was an interview David Mack had done which focused on the question of why Echo was created in the first place. And the idea is that with David Mack and Joe Quesada writing Daredevil, they wanted to create a new character, but it couldn't just be any random character. Instead, they actually wanted to create someone that could complement Daredevil in a lot of ways. And Matt Murdock, as most of you guys know, is blind, and through a combination of his senses, basically forms a kind of echolocation that allows him to discern the world around him and then operate as a superhero. And so the idea here was to create a character who had basically gone through the same experience, the difference being, instead of being blind, she was deaf. And so in Daredevil issue number 9, which was actually kind of uncommon at the time in the sense that we got like a full-on origin for Maya, what we ended up learning is that at some point along the line, her father had basically been killed. We didn't really know a whole lot of the backstory in terms of why her father was killed or how. All we simply knew is that her father was executed, and his business partner actually ended up sending her to a school for kids that were actually disabled because of the fact that she was deaf. And that's where she first learned what it was that she was capable of, that her ability to discern the world around her was limited to her ability to see and her ability to read the lips of others. But as she was watching this person in a piano recital, she basically started to realize she could duplicate the movements of others by watching them simply just do whatever it is that they do. And so after seeing this guy's recital, she went up and immediately perfected the exact recital he did, right? So that established right off the bat, she can basically copy the movements of anybody she sees after having only seen it once. And so during this story, what you ended up learning is that she was set on Daredevil by the Kingpin. And this was basically a big ruse, right? That Wilson Fisk had tricked her into believing that Daredevil was the reason why her father was killed. And so going after Daredevil, what she had done is she had actually sat down and watched multiple videos of Daredevil fighting Bullseye. Now, the reason why David Mack and Joe Quesada chose this is because people sleep on Bullseye, man. Bullseye's ridiculously capable. He's like one of the best fighters in all of Marvel Comics, right? This guy is just, it's crazy how capable he is, right? Between his martial arts and his just pinpoint accuracy, the guy is almost completely unstoppable. But because of the fact that Bullseye, when it came to like hand-to-hand combat, was always able to give Daredevil a run for his money and actually overtook him on a few occasions, he was the best person suited for Maya to basically copy both his moves and Daredevil's moves in her preparatory fight against Daredevil. And so what you actually end up seeing is Maya basically building on the death of Karen Page, operating at the behest of Kingpin, and stepping in as a kind of love interest for Matt Murdock, and using his basically, devastated heart as a means to enter into that position. Now, of course, a fight ultimately breaks out between the two when she makes the move to try to take out Daredevil, and then the truth comes out. And that's when you actually end up finding out that her father was a mob enforcer for Wilson Fisk and was killed at the direction of Wilson Fisk. And so following that, basically Maya shot Wilson, and then he ended up being blind for a little while. But the important thing about this is following that, you basically went into a handful of different stories. By and large, she was still involved in the stories of Daredevil, not as heavily as she was in the beginning, but in Daredevil 52, going into issue 53, and then ultimately culminating in 55, she ended up going on this kind of spirit quest for herself, which is something akin to what Matt Murdock had gone on when he was being trained by Stick and all those members of the cast and whatnot. And so with the way that David Mack had ended the events of the character of Echo in Daredevil following her kind of spirit journey or vision quest, which is technically what it was called, he concluded it in such a way to where she would sort of go forward, and then whatever Marvel wanted to do with the character they could do, but he had kind of set the landscape to where she wouldn't really be an anti-hero or a straight villain the way Elektra was, but could potentially become an actual hero. And so following that, you got one of the best Echo stories ever by Brian Michael Bendis during New Avengers, in a story called Ronin. Now here's the funny thing, Maya was actually the first person to use the Ronin identity in Marvel Comics, and by God did she earn it. Okay, so check this out. So during the New Avengers story arc, and technically it's like issue number 11 where the Ronin story arc starts, but what you end up finding out is she's basically been sent to like infiltrate the criminal underworld in Japan, and it's amazing, right? So the idea behind this is that for those of you guys who never read Brian Michael Bendis' New Avengers, that came in the aftermath of the Avengers Disassembled story arc, right? Which like went into House of M and all that kind of stuff. The grand reshuffling of Marvel Comics, right? So like reworking the Avengers roster, reducing the X-Men population down to like 198 mutants in the world, just different things like that. And so what you had as part of Brian Michael Bendis' New Avengers in the first story arc was something called Breakout, where the villain Elektra took down power to the Raft, right? The giant prison that houses all these different superpowered beings. And so the following stories after that, and really a good chunk of New Avengers, dealt with the members of the New Avengers team tracking down these various people who had escaped. I want to say it was something like 42 villains had escaped, and their goal was to like find them, locate them, bring them in, different things like that. And so as part of this, Captain America had found Daredevil. Now Daredevil's identity had already been dumped out into the world, different things like that. So Matt Murdock couldn't just go and operate as a superhero because the government would find him and track him down and that kind of a thing. So he was largely operating underground. And so what had happened was that Captain America had informed Matt Murdock that Ken Harada, the Silver Samurai, had quite literally been escorted away, right? Like somebody sent in a means by which for him to leave, and then he was taken to Japan. And a lot of the questions they had was who were the ones behind it, right? Was it the Hand, the Yakuza? Nobody really knew what was going on. But the big concern they had, based on really the information that Matt Murdock had, as well as like SHIELD files and the information of Captain America, was that the criminal underworld, ever since the arrest of Harada, had just been in a state of disarray. It was quite literally a giant civil war, right? So you had like all these factions, the Hand, the Yakuza, all these organizations basically fighting against each other and vying for power to control the underworld. But back in its day, the whole underworld was controlled by Clan Yoshida, which was governed by the Silver Samurai. And so the idea here is that Silver Samurai had basically been taken to Japan for the purpose of unifying the criminal underworld, and that he would basically be a puppet of the Hand. And being used by the Hand themselves would have control of the criminal underworld. Now, for those of you guys who don't know who the Hand is, those guys are amazing. I absolutely love the Hand. They date back to the days of feudal Japan, when what you had were basically separated tribes of Japanese existing in the mountains, practicing martial arts, which had largely been forbidden at the time. And all these different clans were unified by Kagenobu Yoshioka. Of course, it also tied into them like worshiping the beast and getting mystical powers and things like that. The important thing is the Hand is like this mystical ninja clan that can resurrect the dead. And they'll only ever come at you in one of two ways. Either they'll send like a single member in and they'll like assassinate you if they want to keep it quiet, or they'll send in just overwhelming force. So like if the Hand, for example, wanted to take out the Avengers, which they could, they would send in like 500 ninjas, and they would just attack the Avengers compound in one fell swoop. And any members who died would be resurrected and sent back in again. So it's usually like a war of attrition when the Hand comes after you. But the idea is the Hand basically wanted to be the ones to run everything. The problem is that Matt Murdock couldn't go in and deal with that, despite the fact that he's the best person to do it because of his dealings with the Hand and the Yakuza and the Silver Samurai and all that kind of stuff. And so the introduction of Echo as part of this was basically Matt Murdock saying, look, Captain America, I can't do it, but I know a guy. And so that basically led to Echo being brought in and infiltrating the entire organization in Japan, only for us to basically find out that what was really going on is the Hand and Hydra were working together. Now, a lot of this went into the events of like Enemy of the State, right? So Wolverine was basically taken by the Hand and Hydra. He was brainwashed and then ultimately saved by the members of the superhero community, and that called it a day. I believe that's what led to the death of Elektra, and then Elektra returned during the events of Secret Invasion only to find out she was a Skrull. Of course, that also gave us the What If story where Wolverine was never stopped, and Wolverine basically killed the superhero community. We've actually got a video on it. Wolverine kills the Marvel Universe. That came out of Enemy of the State. But the information gained here basically allowed Echo to get back to the Avengers and tell them what was going on. Now, the show of force and what Echo was really capable of actually came to bear better during this story than any other story Marvel's written. And the reason why is because when she tried to escape, she was ultimately discovered. And so what ended up happening is all these Hand ninjas just started descending on her, along with like the clan of the Silver Samurai and Hydra. And so what actually ends up going on is where she had previously made an agreement with Captain America that she wouldn't kill people if she didn't have to, she went all in. She was a one-man army. It was, I guess, a one-woman army. It was crazy. This girl took on something like 36 members of the Hand. She took on Clan Yoshida, right? And it was all just because of her powers to duplicate the moves of others that she was able to overcome them all. But literally Bendis was like, yeah, man, this girl is just like, she's a killing machine, right? Like you give this girl the right motivation and the right kind of training, she'll kill anybody in her path, and it doesn't matter who it is. Now you also got a really cool set of events because following that, the Hand had actually followed Echo back to Avengers compound. So in one of the displays that you don't normally get to see all that often, you got to see all the new Avengers fighting the Hand. And like, it wasn't one of those things where they were like, oh my God, we're gonna die, you know, but it was like, it was cool to see like Captain America and Iron Man and Spider-Man and Luke Cage and like Spider-Woman, Jessica Drew, who were like, if we're not careful, they will kill us. So like, we need to work as a seamless unit, right? It was a really, really cool fight that happened there. Although now that I think about it, I believe this is actually what led into the Elektra solo series when you actually got the origin of the Hand for the first time, because during that whole thing, what you ended up learning is that it seemed like Elektra was actually the one who was leading the Hand, who didn't seem to have a leader at the time. And so Madam Hydra was running the whole Hydra thing, Elektra was running the Hand, and where Madam Hydra was basically arrested, it led to the belief that Elektra was actually going to unify Hydra and the Hand together and then basically run them both. And so the character of Echo was actually kind of kept there for the purpose of just keeping an eye on things. Now, all that came to a head during the events of Civil War, and while Maya was not necessarily directly involved in the events of Civil War, she was involved insofar as Bendis started wrapping up loose ends involving her story. And so what you ended up learning is that Elektra was leading the Hand and discovered that Maya was there. The two of them engaged in a fight and Elektra killed Maya. But the whole reason why Elektra wanted to kill Maya in the first place is because Maya could not be easily turned. There wasn't really a way for Elektra to get Maya to ally with the cause of Hydra and the Hand and then go forward from there. But by killing her and then using the mystical abilities of the Hand to resurrect Maya, she was basically a clean slate. Now, the New Avengers were able to rescue Maya, but because of the fact that her involvement and her role in the New Avengers had been discovered by Elektra and the Hand, the belief was that it was only a matter of time before they tracked her down if they took her back to the States and to essentially the New Avengers mansion. And so because of the fact that it would lead to the Hand basically sending just an overwhelming number of forces to New York, there would be collateral damage, innocent people would die, different things along those lines. And so in an effort to keep that happening, they actually took her to the Harada fortress, knowing the Hand would not be foolish enough to try to invade the fortress of the Silver Samurai. And so during that time, she was basically left to allow the whole resurrection process, the drugs that are used, things like that, to run their course through her system, which actually led to a fight between her and the Avengers where she almost killed them all. And then in turn, once it was done, another fight took place between her and Elektra, which led to her killing Elektra. Now, the significance of that moment was not that she killed Elektra. That wasn't very important. What was important is that was Brian Michael Bendis setting the stage for the events of Secret Invasion, because that's when you learned it was not actually Elektra, that instead it was a Skrull impersonating Elektra, hence the events of Secret Invasion being slowly revealed to the world. Following this, Echo had basically demonstrated herself as being a very capable member of the New Avengers. And so that's why during the events of Bendis's New Avengers run, she basically stayed alongside the team. She was by no means like a major player. I mean, she was, but she was just kind of there. If anything, it was probably Bendis trying to figure out what he was going to do with her, or just kind of having her there on the team while he focused on the bigger picture, going into like Secret Invasion, things like that. The World War Hulk event was right around the corner under Greg Pak, right? So there were a lot of massive events taking place in the mid to late 2000s, but she ended up basically living alongside like Jessica Jones and Clint Barton and that kind of a thing. I wouldn't say that Echo was useless, but I would say she was not as useful as she could have been. Now, a lot of this seemed to be predicated on the idea, or at least I base it on her role in Secret Invasion, which there wasn't a whole lot doing here. In all honesty, her role in Secret Invasion really came in the main Secret Invasion story itself. She was, for example, one of the people who realized that Spider-Woman Jessica Drew was actually a Skrull. She was there in the Savage Land when the Skrull ship was discovered and a big fight broke out, and then she basically joined the rest of the people in fighting against the Skrulls themselves. But it wasn't one of these things where it was like Secret Invasion Echo #1, right? So it wasn't like she had like her own story arc going on in Secret Invasion. She did, but it was just part of a larger run with the whole story itself. There were some things that went on during like the infiltration event, for example, her being in a relationship with Hawkeye, different things along those lines, but it really seemed more of Brian Michael Bendis just kind of testing the character out, kind of shopping her around to get a feel for what people were responsive to. And that's one of the things that I hope you guys notice, is that during this time in Echo's publication history, it was really Bendis who was doing a lot of work with her character. And a lot of this really came during Moon Knight Volume 6. Now, depending on who you talk to, some people will say they loved Bendis's Moon Knight, other people will say it was okay. I thought it had some great moments. One of the things that I thought was really, really cool is that he was like a one-man Avenger operating in Los Angeles, right? And one of the things that had happened is Captain America had basically tracked down Moon Knight and informed Mark Spector that a lot of criminals that were in New York were migrating to LA and trying to take up some measure of criminal activity out there, which doesn't surprise me. It is Los Angeles. It's the home of shady stuff. So the thing about this is that Maya had actually taken up acting alongside Moon Knight, one part because, as Captain America stated, quote unquote, Avengers never have to act alone, which I kind of thought was okay. But two, she was already on her own mission. The two of them working together actually came by happenstance when Mark Spector just came busting in and then she had to blow her cover and all that kind of cool stuff. But the other thing about this, and what I imagine, or at least what I've seen to be one of the more divisive things about Bendis's run, is that Mark Spector's multiple personality basically came into full array. And a lot of people saw this as Bendis trying to turn Moon Knight into like a Legion-esque character where he just had like all these different personalities and he didn't know which one was actually him. There was one point where he believed he was Spider-Man. There was another point where he believed he was Wolverine. And in fact, during this particular run in the story, going all the way up to the events of Moon Knight Volume 6, issue number 9, there's basically one instance where they end up tracking down Count Nefaria, who's kind of like this longtime villain in Marvel Comics, who is basically like this giant underworld, the kind of basically this kingpin of the Los Angeles criminal underworld. It looked like he killed Echo, and then in turn, Moon Knight basically took on like his Wolverine persona and then attacked Count Nefaria, right? And then basically killed him. But like with that story taking place in 2012, with the exception of like a single Daredevil story, which was actually Daredevil Annual Volume 4, issue number 1, you never really saw anything from her. And a part of me believes that Marvel actually forgot about her because of course you had the events of Secret Wars by Jonathan Hickman and like Avengers and New Avengers and all that kind of stuff. So she really just kind of seemed to vanish out of the Marvel landscape for a number of years. Now, more recently, during the events of Jason Aaron's Avengers run, which is technically Avengers Volume 8, you had the Enter the Phoenix storyline where she basically came in and was one of the individuals who was selected to be imbued with the power of the Phoenix Force. This was really more of a kind of like tournament of champions, to be honest, that the Phoenix would imbue itself to different individuals and see how they reacted as a test to determine who was the most compatible with the Phoenix Force itself. In a lot of ways, it didn't necessarily make sense in relation to the overall role the Phoenix plays, that the Phoenix as a cosmic entity kind of already knows who's the most compatible with it. That's one of the things that that Chris Claremont established in the old X-Men comics, Bizarre Adventures, issue number 27, the original origin of Jean Grey, how it tied into like the Phoenix recognizing who Jean Grey was. What is it, the missing stories or X-Men the Missing Years that actually dealt with like Jean Grey's involvement with the Fantastic Four, her temporary possession by the Phoenix. There were just a lot of things that had gone on and like Excalibur stories and so on that Marvel had done over the course of something like 20 or 30 years that seemed to kind of fly in the face of everything that Jason Aaron was doing. But the important thing here is that at the end of this big battle royale, this big tournament, that Echo was selected to basically be the new host for the Phoenix Force in Marvel Comics. Now, a lot of this seemed to be done for the explicit purpose of boosting the profile of Echo in order to kind of set the stage for people to be interested in her character during the events of Hawkeye. If I'm being honest with you guys, that was a terrible decision. In my mind, some kind of an event or some kind of storyline should have been created in the pages of the Avengers where Echo basically fought the team, and with the exception of some super heavy hitter like Thor, she basically overtook everyone because she easily could. But again, that was the route they chose, which is kind of a weird thing because honestly, the Phoenix Force hasn't really been interesting in Marvel Comics for years. But that basically went into a story that focused on an event called Heroes Reborn. Now, Heroes Reborn was not very good. It was a terrible follow-up to the story involving Echo. And so it's one of these things where Marvel kind of had this great opportunity to boost the profile of what is, even among general comic book readers, a pretty obscure character in order to set the stage for the Hawkeye show. And they basically screwed the pooch. I mean, literally, the entire gist of the story is that Phil Coulson essentially made a deal with Mephisto to get the Pandemonium Cube, which basically allowed him to rewrite reality, and then he ended up bringing in the Squadron Supreme, which was basically the Marvel Comics version of the Justice League, and then like Echo fought some of them, and then basically the story ended when the cube was destroyed. It was not very good. It was not a very well-received story. But regardless, Echo's one of these characters where, if we're being honest with ourselves, she peaked at the end of Brian Michael Bendis' Moon Knight run. That's really where like the most most interesting elements of her character kind of peeked out, and that was basically it. I think a lot of that will change now since she's in the Hawkeye show. Marvel Comics will likely end up doing a lot more with her, but at the moment, if you guys really are interested in the character of Echo, all you really need to do is concern yourself with her old school stories, right? Her original stories. Daredevil by David Mack, going into Brian Michael Bendis' New Avengers, and then going into somewhat the events of Secret Invasion, and then Brian Michael Bendis' Moon Knight. So with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.